Well, hello everybody. This is Truth Seeker here, and I've been working on a couple of projects that have actually taken quite a bit of time. Luckily, I've had a little more time recently because of the holiday season uh, to put into some of the research that has been going into these projects. One project was a comparison between Jehovah's Witnesses and the Bible students. And another project that I'm working on right now is the 2018 Jehovah's Witness service report, the statistics that have come out. And there's some very interesting results in those. I'm going to present that as a separate um, video because, first off, I have a tendency to make long videos, so I want to shorten it up a little bit. And secondly, because I haven't done all of the analysis that I think I might like to do. There are some pretty interesting things. I do want to refer you to Lloyd Evans' video. He had just done a quick video, 25-minute video on the JW statistics, and he was looking at it from a a growth perspective, country by country growth perspective, which is interesting because he presents it graphically in a map showing those countries that are growing, those countries that are not growing, and it looks like a pretty dire picture for Watchtower, and at least in the growth area. Um, Here I'm going into statistics already. I just like numbers. I also have a math channel if anybody's interested. That's another project I'm working on. It's Math Man, two separate words, capital MATH, space, capital MANN. And if you get a seashell, spiral seashell as an insignia, you found the webpage. I'm doing a project in honor of my late college professor, math professor. So you can check that out if you'd like. Right now, I have about 13, 14 videos there. I'm still trying to work out the visual on that. It seems that whatever I do, the either doesn't show up well or whatever. But anyway, I'm doing my best. But for now, the stats will be coming. I still have some statistical review to do that complements Lloyd Evans. It actually is going to be a little bit harder to understand, and that I think may be unfortunate, but there's some advantages to some of the ratios that I've been comparing because they give you insight into the Jehovah's Witness organization's problems in terms of growth. They pretty much stagnated. I mean, this growth in the United States is essentially zero, flatlined. I think the growth was 0.21%, very, very small. It was a positive growth. Canada is negative, and global growth was 1.35%. I think that's the lowest overall growth that the Jehovah's Witnesses have had since they began keeping records. And some of these records, some of these graphics that I'll show will illustrate very definitively how their rate of growth has diminished substantially over the decades. So anyway, in this video, I thought I'd get started on the comparison of the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Bible students. I'm going to do that in a series. There are three aspects that I think I want to address when I compare the Jehovah's Witness with the Bible students movement. First, doctrinally. Second, is the differences, when the differences occurred, maybe why, and got a phone call. It's those darn telemarketers. I tell you, they could drive you crazy. So anyway, I said that I wanted to do a comparison doctrinally. I want to do a comparison, a contrast of the doctrines to show where they differ substantially. And then I want to talk about the culture and language of the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses. There are quite a few similarities in that area there culturally. And so those are the three ways I want to do a comparison. First off, I want to do the similarities. You would expect that a religion or two sects of religion that originated from the same founder, Charles Taze Russell in this case, would have some similarities, and certainly they do. In fact, I think in a way, don't get me wrong on this, because I'm not trying to boost the Bible students in this sense, but I think the Jehovah's Witnesses are sort of a dumbed down version of the Bible students. The Jehovah's Witnesses really cut back on a lot of doctrine over the years. And so when you take a look at the Jehovah's Witnesses, it depends on when you're looking at them, what time frame, to talk about how similar they are or were to the Bible students. And I'll give you an example. The Jehovah's Witnesses today believe that Jesus' second presence, or parousia, occurred in 1914. But it wasn't until the mid-1930s that the Jehovah's Witnesses changed their teachings in that respect. Up until the mid-1930s, they taught that Jesus had come invisibly in 1874, as Charles Taze Russell had taught. It was Rutherford that changed that doctrine. So there were a number of changes that really occurred in the 1930s. There were a number of doctrinal changes and cultural changes that took place in the 40s and 50s that helped define the Watchtower as it is today. The landmark lawsuits regarding the flag, saluting the flag, and Pledge Allegiance, and a number of things like that. The fact that they take a conscientious objector stand, to the point where they would rather see their young men go to jail rather than serve as conscientious objectors as an alternative service. They adopted disfellowshipping as a practice in 1952 for punishment. So there were a number of things. The blood doctrine was around 1945. So these changes really began to change the face of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So it depends on when you look at them, because the Bible students haven't changed. The Bible students Their doctrines are pretty much in line with Pastor Charles Russell, and whatever he wrote is pretty much what Bible students accept. The clock stopped for Bible students in 1916 when Russell died. So before I go into a very long introduction, let's just get right into the comparison, because I think really to do a fair comparison, we got to look at what Jehovah's Witnesses would be familiar with today, not 30 years ago. I mean, Watchtower is very good at hiding their teachings from their members from 30, 40, 50 years ago, and then they tend to recycle these teachings. And the time they recycle them, nobody knows that it's a reversion back to an older teaching. So that's one of the advantages that they have in keeping some of the older teachings more or less obscure from the membership. One example is the wise and faithful servant. That's been an issue since the time of Charles Taze Russell. Most witnesses today would know it as the faithful and discreet slave. It's only because of the way it's translated in their Bible, but it's the same scripture. There have been various interpretations, and it went from being Charles Taze Russell himself to the movement itself to the organization during Rutherford's time. The organization was the wise and faithful slave or servant. And now it's gone back to the governing body. The leaders of the Watchtower are now the wise and faithful servant, and that's a relatively recent change. So in a sense, it's kind of recycled back to the idea that it's a discrete body of men, or as in Russell's day, it was Russell, a person, rather than an organization. So this doctrine, this teaching, has been bantered around for over 100 years. So that's one of the things. They're a moving target. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. The Bible students are less of a moving target than the Watchtower, because the Watchtower, it can change to new light, and overnight, literally. So that's been operating that way since Judge Rutherford and his time. That's how he tended to operate. Whatever came out in the latest Watchtower was the new truth, the new light, and the Watchtower was the channel. So anyway, I put together a list of the key doctrines, I think, that where both the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you were a, let's say, a Protestant who didn't know anything about either sect, and you met a Bible student and you met a Jehovah's Witness, and they talked to you, these are the things where you wouldn't really be able to differentiate very well between the two, because they are either exactly the same, or they are so similar in their beliefs that the nuances would be lost on the person who would be observing them. So both groups are millennialist restorationist groups. Okay, that's a pretty broad, generalized statement, but what that means is, back in the 19th century, it was a very popular belief that the earth would be destroyed. In fact, that's the idea of a lot of fundamentalist Christians today that Armageddon is going to destroy this world and God's going to make a new heaven and a new earth, and he's going to do so literally. The Second Adventists were very strong proponents of this idea. William Miller, they believed that the earth was going to be destroyed in fire and that God would make a brand new earth for all the faithful to live on. Russell didn't buy into that idea. He took the scripture, "The earth abideth forever," and said that yes, the earth is going to last forever, and humankind, it was made for humankind, and people were going to live here forever. And so God was going to restore the earth to perfection from its fallen condition. And so that would be the key work of the 1,000 years, was to restore the earth and humankind and the natural order back to the way it was in perfection during the before the fall, before Adam and Eve's transgression. The earth would be just like it was in Eden. And I'm not going to take these necessarily in any kind of a sequential order. These are somewhat random being presented. Russell was the founder. Both sects claim Russell is the founder, which is not a big deal. I mean, that's not a major doctrine or anything, but that's something that both groups have in common. Doctrinally, neither group believes in hell or a place of torment. They don't believe that the doctrines that a God of love would torture people in eternal fire. They believe that there is no soul, that humans are a soul, that they don't possess a soul that continues to live. When you're dead, and you are sort of asleep in God's memory. And God would restore people because he has downloaded, like a giant supercomputer, all the information that made the person who they were, and that they're going to get a new perfect body in the kingdom, and God's going to download all that information into their brain. So people don't have souls, they are souls, and God breathed the breath of life into them. And so that's a key similarity. And that also goes into the idea of hell, that there's no place of torment. People are punished by going into oblivion. Historically, the Watchtower is proud of its history, and it does acknowledge a number of Second Adventists: Jonas Wendell, William Miller, George Storrs, George Stetson, Henry Grew, as key individuals who contributed to the increase of knowledge of truth during the 19th century. But they don't, for some reason, the Watchtower, for some reason, omits Barber. And that's interesting because I'm not quite sure what they got against Barber. I know the Bible students, they acknowledge Barber, but they don't like him because Russell didn't like him. So that's a key thing. Neither group accepts the creeds of Christendom. That all of the creeds were of Catholicism. They were of men. They weren't of God. They were not given by the Holy Spirit. And so none of the Christian creeds, like the Trinity and the any other. There were a whole bunch of these councils, and creeds came out of these councils, like the infallibility of the Pope and things like that. None of those were accepted by either group. Um, God. Now they have lightened up on the idea of dispensations, Watchtower, although they believe that there are distinct periods of time in which specific things will occur. For example, the millennium is 1,000 years long. So, in a sense, they are dispensationalist in that they had dispensational roots. They believe that the period before the flood was a distinct period, and that God put an end to it with the flood. Bible students are very dispensational. They use charts. The Watchtower has gotten away from using the charts, and they kind of backed away from this dispensational aspect to some degree. But that there's still some vestiges of it left in the Watchtower. So in a sense, I'll call them dispensational because they do believe that there are distinct periods of time and that there were distinct activities to take place during those periods of time. And when you believe that, you're really dispensational. And that's exactly what the Bible students are. The Bible students make no question about the fact that they're dispensational. When it comes to creation, both groups believe that God created the earth and the heavens. However, the Bible students, now you'll find a wide variety of ideas among individual Bible students. See, the difference between the Bible students, one difference that's key between the Bible students and the Jehovah's Witnesses is that there's no centralized governing body in the Bible students. So individuals can hold a measure of individual thought as long as it doesn't deviate too far from what Russell said. Um, the so when it comes to creation, all believe that God's hand was involved in creation. There may be some that are a little bit more open minded or liberal in their ideas about how that occurred, whether or not, God used evolution. Um, Most will not. The vast majority do not accept evolution. And the reason for that is because evolution, at least the evolution of man or humankind, is destroys the doctrine of the ransom. And so both groups accept the idea that God created humankind and the heavens and the earth and all the animals in it, and that Adam and Eve were the progenitors of the human race. Those are key because evolution would destroy their concept of a redeemer, that Adam was born a man to a perfect human being to offer himself as a sacrifice and a substitution for Adam's transgression, thereby releasing and redeeming the human race from sin and sickness, and thus allowing for the millennium to be established and the restoration of humankind. So the doctrine of the ransom is a cornerstone doctrine for both groups. One difference there, though, is that the Jehovah's Witnesses have dropped the idea that Adam and Eve themselves are covered by this ransom, that they are not going to be resurrected, whereas Bible students believe Adam and Eve will be resurrected in the 1,000 years. So it's very, that's something that was a doctrine that was introduced in 1937 by Judge Rutherford. You can find uh, Watchtower articles in the early 1930s, 1932, 1933, where they talk about Adam and Eve's resurrection in the kingdom. So Watchtower did teach it early on, but as Jehovah's Witnesses, but they dropped that in the late 1930s. Um, Bible students tend they're less accepting of science. There are still some Bible students that accept the Valian theory of creation, and it's kind of hard to know exactly where the Jehovah's Witnesses stand on this. They believe sort of something the same as the Valian theory of creation, where the fourth creative day they explain as covered by a shroud of clouds so that the sun and the moon and the stars couldn't be viewed from the surface of the planet. Well, it doesn't matter, does it? When there wasn't anybody on the surface of the planet, no animals, no humans to view the sun and the moon and the stars. So I think that's kind of a silly reasoning, to say, because there was nobody there to view the sun and the moon and the stars. So to say that the sun and the moon and the stars were obscured by some sort of veil of clouds is really a poor explanation of trying to explain away the discrepancy of the sun being made on the fourth creative day and plants being made on the third creative day. You see, the ancients didn't understand that the sun was our source of light, and they thought that "let there be light" was something that emanated from God, and it would allow the plants to live, and that the sun was something that God put in the sky later. Um, and so they had no problem with their lack of understanding of science to believe that the sun was made after plants were made on the third day. Bible students have always had a problem with that, and Isaac Vail was a 19th century geology teacher, and he came up with an idea that the Earth was shrouded in rings and clouds and veiled the sun from view. But again, like I said, there wasn't anybody around, no plants, animals. Well, there were plants, but there were no animals, nothing with any kind of sense of sentience or higher order of being uh, to observe the sun, the moon, and the stars. So this, like I said, the idea that it was covered with a veil is not a very good explanation away. Anyway, that word "made" is no different than the word "made" that is used literally when it says that God made the heavens and the earth, and that God made the firmament, and that God made. There are two words that are translated created and made, and they both mean the same thing, and they're both used interchangeably in throughout the creative day context. And so this idea that made didn't mean made in the fourth creative day does not hold, because it means made or created in every other context in the creative setting, in that entire creative period that's being described in the first chapter of Genesis. So all of a sudden it doesn't mean made, it means veiled, or it means to obscure. Well, no, that you can't just change the meaning of the word. So that's what Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses do. Jehovah's Witnesses recently, I just found an article. A few years ago, I read an article on creation from the Watchtower on jw.org, and they said that the earth could have been made in thousands of years, as if that were reasonable. You know, when we know that that science said that the universe is 14.8 billion years old, and the earth is 4.5 billion years old, and the sun is 5 billion years old. And you know, the uh, Watchtower thought, you know, that thousands of years would be sufficient enough for the creative process. Bible students had it in a nice, neat package of 7,000-year days. So that the creative week was 49,000 years, and that the millennium would complete that creative week and make it an even 50,000. That was what Russell taught. There's still Bible students who hold on to that concept. Um, Jehovah's Witnesses recently, as I was researching a little bit, uh, acknowledged that scientists indicate that the universe is billions and billions of years old, 15 billion years old, and that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, and they didn't deny it. So it seems as though Watchtower may be uh, acquiescing a little bit to what science has determined. So you know, it's a little hard. I think they're trying to do that under the radar a bit, and make changes to be more acceptable to what science has found. So, but in every other sense, the two groups believe the same because of the ransom. And when it comes to humans creation, they are very definitely, you know, 6,000 years, that they're looking for the 7,000 year, which is the millennium. And that's what brought about the whole 1975 business, is that they thought that the 6,000 years had ended in 1975, and that the 7,000 years would begin, and that would be the millennial age. It didn't happen, but that's, you know, when it comes to human creation, they're very much the same as Bible students, that Adam and Eve were created by God roughly 6,000 years ago, and that they were redeemed by Jesus' ransom sacrifice. Both groups believe in Armageddon and the destruction of this social order by God and his forces in heaven. That is Jesus and his army, which is the 144,000. Both groups believe in the 144,000. That 144,000 go to heaven. The Watchtower only believes that a very select few will live through Armageddon and into the kingdom, and those are baptized Jehovah's Witnesses. Bible students do believe that everybody will have an opportunity for resurrection in the kingdom and a chance to be judged for life in the 1,000 years. Um, Watchtower is a little more obscure about its teachings as to who is and who isn't resurrected in the 1,000 years, but they do believe that people who had not had the opportunity to know the truth, which are billions, um, will be resurrected and given an opportunity in the 1,000 years to accept the truth. Now, the uh, the only ones who will live through Armageddon are the Jehovah's Witnesses. So there's a difference there between the Watchtower and the Bible students in that respect. But you know, for the most part, they do believe very similarly with regard to the great time of trouble or tribulation that comes upon the earth before Armageddon, and then Armageddon will destroy all social systems, all Satan's systems, and Satan will be cast into he will be imprisoned during the 1,000 years as a result of Armageddon. He'll be captured in Armageddon and cast into a prison. It's called a bottomless pit in Revelation 20. So both groups believe that. Both groups place a high importance on 1914. Now, both groups, Bible students and Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that Gentile times ended in 1914. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses used to believe a little bit more like the Bible students in terms of when Jesus' second presence began. Well, they over time put everything onto 1914. And so 1914 has a lot more lumped on it. But both groups believe that the times of Gentiles ended in 1914. And the Bible students do believe, there are many Bible students who believe that the kingdom began in heaven in 1914, and they call that the heavenly reign. And when Jesus rules on earth, it'll be the mediatorial reign, and so that there are different 1,000 years. It's complicated. And when you look at their dispensational charts, you'll see these overlapping crisscrosses of dispensations, and those overlaps try to account for these different 1,000 years that begin at different times. It's all silliness, but anyway, the Jehovah's Witnesses believe in something a little bit more simplistic. They believe that the 1,000 years begins at the end of Armageddon, and that the work of Jehovah's Witnesses that live through Armageddon will be to rebuild the world. Well, it's not too different from what the Bible students believe. They believe that those that live through the kingdom will be set to the task of rebuilding the world. So, and they will be under the governance and control of the 144,000 who will reign with Christ as kings and priests. What, honey? Well, Armageddon precedes the kingdom, and then. The big difference there is the Bible students think everyone's going to get resurrected. Well, I said that. I said that. Yeah, I did. I mentioned that. I said that. Yes, she's trying to point out that something I said before she came out of the room. So anyway, the 1914 is big. They're the only two groups that believe in 1914 based on the chronology of the 2,520 days, and And there are plenty of videos on why that's a fallacy. My throat's starting to get a little scratchy, and I'm going to have to leave in a few minutes. Um, Satan is ruling this world. Both groups believe that all the institutions and governments and everything are influenced by Satan, and they will be destroyed. Satan was cast out of heaven into earth in 1914 and invisibly. Both groups believe that. Both groups believe that Jesus was Michael, the archangel, before he came to earth as a human being. Both believe in the virgin birth, and the reason for that is to bring forth a perfect seed. That it was necessary that a virgin be used in order to prevent the seed from being tainted somehow, and Jesus not being perfect. So it was necessary that a virgin be used to make sure that the baby that was born from the miraculous conception was perfect, and that's why Jesus was a perfect man, because Mary was a virgin. Both believe in that. Um, the both groups believe that Michael is Jesus, that he was also the Logos. Jesus was an archangel, the first created, the first archangel, and that all things were created by Jesus after God made Jesus. All believe in the great flood and the destruction of the Nephilim, and so both groups believe in that. That only Noah was pure, of pure human stock. They both groups believe. I remember being taught as a child that during the time of trouble, that during Armageddon, that there would be a great persecution that would come against the truth, against those that promoted the truth, the Bible students, because the Bible students believe that the Catholic Church was going to come back into power again and join in with the governments and seek out all the Bible students and persecute them. And they called that the dark day in which no man could work. Jehovah's Witnesses believe in the same sort of persecution, that in the Great Tribulation, the governments are going to join in with religion, and they're going to seek out all those that I guess they're not going to join with religion. They're going to seek out anybody who's religious, which includes the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they're going to persecute them badly. And they had these a couple of years ago. They had a convention that had what they called the bunker videos, and that described the terror and the fear that the Jehovah's Witnesses would feel during that period of time. Armageddon is just around the corner. Armageddon has been just around the corner for 140 years. I think they believe in the same thing about angels, that angels are ranked. They're like different orders: cherubim, seraphim, archangels, and so on. And I think in that respect, they're pretty much the same. That God intervenes on behalf of individuals in their lives as He sees fit. that if if it's no matter what, Jehovah God did it. Again, Bible students don't use the name Jehovah as much, but they do believe that the name of God is Jehovah. You'll see it in Russell's writings. Bible students today still use the name. You'll hear it in their talks. You can listen to their YouTube channel and find, many of the elders using the name Jehovah. Talked about the 144,000 being the only ones that go to heaven. They're considered the first fruits class. They would be the ones that would be specially chosen to be joint heirs with Jesus. Both groups celebrate the memorial. The only difference there is that out of 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses, only 19,000 partake of the memorial. Even though that's more than all of the Bible students put together, it's a rare thing in the Jehovah's Witnesses to see somebody partake of the memorial. When you attend a Bible student memorial, they will all partake. So if there are 30 of them in the group, you'll see 30 people partaking of the memorial. The date, the 14th of Nisan, I notice is chosen in a different way. I don't know the technicalities of that, but often the dates that the memorial is celebrated between the two groups is different. And I know the Bible students, they use some method based on the Jewish calendar to identify the 14th of Nisan. The second coming of Christ is invisible, as is everything else God and Christ does. Everything is invisible. Christ and the church will fight Satan and win and cast him and bind him into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. And then he'll be let loose at the end of the 1,000 years to deceive the world. And he goes out and deceives the world as the sands of the sea, Gog and Magog, and God sends fire on those that desert the principles of the kingdom, and that's the second death. And those that align themselves with Christ and God, Jehovah, will live forever, happily forever and ever. So both groups believe that, and I think that's pretty much it from let's say, the overall perspective. I'm sure if I really dug deeply, I could go into all of it would take me probably hours to go through all of the same beliefs, minor things, minor technicalities. I think I hit on sort of the bigger ones. I think I remember there were Bible students tend to believe in demons and how the devils, the fallen angels, can influence you. You've got to be careful. I know that Watchtower believes, Jehovah's Witnesses believe the same things. They had the Smurf deal back in the 80s. So Bible students believe in a very, very similar thing, that you're always got to be on the watch out, because you never know when a fallen angel is going to be there ready to deceive you. So you have to be always vigilant. and you have to stay absolutely away from the occult. Both groups strongly believe in Satan and his influence and his minions, and that the occult is of direct result of Satan. So I think I kind of captured the essence of the similarities. You can see that both groups have very um, strong parallels in their belief system, um, on a one-to-one basis, and in their belief systems. There are some substantial differences, and I alluded to some, but I'm going to focus on some of the key differences in my next video, in my next part 2 of the series. So anyway, I hope this has been helpful. You can see why, if a person who didn't know anything about either sect ran into a Jehovah's Witness or ran into a Bible student, they'd be confused. They wouldn't see a difference. They would think that both are pretty much the same religion, both dressed the same. I mean, I many of the Bible students that I knew were very much like the Jehovah's Witnesses I knew. I mean, I lived in a neighborhood surrounded by Jehovah's Witnesses. I rented from a Jehovah's Witness for 10 years, duplex, and he owned 4 duplex. Uh, and this They held meetings, and so we saw 20 or 30 people pile into one of these homes and have a book study. Bible students did the same thing. That's cultural similarity. They dress the same. They comport themselves in the same way. It'd be very difficult to tell the difference between a Bible student and a Jehovah's Witness. But anyway, we'll talk about the differences, and we'll talk about the culture uh, of the two groups in the next couple of videos that I do. So this is Truth Seeker wishing you all well. And again, I'm working on the statistics. That's going to come up soon. I got some more charts that I want to create before I do the video on that. So anyway, everybody take care, and I wish you the best until the next video. So long now.